Well, we've been talking about this for quite some time. Last couple of years, we've seen some near misses on runways, in part, again, because increased traffic coming out of the pandemic, but also because we need more people working for air traffic control. We need more people in the FAA. We need more people in the TSA. And you're having all of these cuts and slashing all these expenses. I want to go back to this Axios article, Willie. So here is, if you look at this, this is where the money goes. Social Security, health, net interest on the debt, Medicare. You go down all of these numbers. FAA, it's not even a dot here. So slashing air safety, slashing safety for people that make sure that our nuclear, our nuclear stockpile is safe. I mean, you could go down the list. They're not even dots on this budget. And, Ali, I want to take two quotes from this Axios article, and then have you talk about what's going on the Hill versus Doge. As Mike Allen and Jim Vandehei write, when you consider where federal money really goes, most Doge oddities and outrages amount to rounding errors in a sea of government obligations, and they do. And those rounding errors that they're supposedly taking a chainsaw to, they're not, hardly even cutting, but what they're cutting is dangerous. And then there's an old saying, the U.S. government consists of a military attached to an insurance company. And that is true. Add up the defense budget, add up Medicare, add up Social Security, add up Medicaid, add up interest on the debt, and you're getting close to 90% of what the federal government spends every year. And so you've got theatrics with Doge, but nothing that's actually going to help us move closer to a balanced budget, are not increasing the sea of debt by $23 trillion over the next decade, as the Congressional Budget Office says.
And the CBO, of course, is regularly included in these conversations as they move forward on these kinds of legislative pieces. The CBO always has a score attached to them. So we always know what it's going to look like, how much it's going to cost, and then how much it's going to add to the debt over time. So I think it's really important the way that you're highlighting this Axios piece, where you basically show that Doge is nibbling around the edges. Now, one of the pieces I think that's the common thread here, when we talk about the town halls that Republicans are now so weary and wary of actually continuing with, one of the things that I heard from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle is that after they came back from being in their home districts last week, some of them having town halls that were publicized, others just having these kinds of conversations with their constituents, Medicaid was the key thing that continued coming up in these conversations. And I ask Democrats if it's that voters and constituents are at an outrage point, or if they're just in a questioning and concerned point. And it is the latter, according to most of my conversations, which puts Democrats in the position of having to educate people about what's actually at play in these budget reconciliation talks. And that's why you hear the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries talking like this. Watch.
The House Republican budget resolution will set in motion the largest Medicaid cut in American history. It's outrageous. In many ways, this is a matter of life and death. And so every day, every week, every month, for however long it takes, we're going to push back and do everything we can to stop this budget from passing the House of Representatives in final form and ever becoming law.
So, of course, we saw Democrats scrambling on attendance issues that actually had been kind of a thorny issue within the caucus. I had been hearing yesterday as I was on the Hill that Democrats were getting a little bit annoyed that there were some really close bills that attendance issues could have forced not to pass. But then, of course, we saw members flying across the country despite health issues to be there to try to make a show of not letting this reconciliation procedural vote pass. But look, on Medicaid, this is going to be the key issue, Joe, because the speaker says he didn't give consent concessions, but moderate members that ultimately fell in line with the rest of the party were voicing concerns about Medicaid, and that's going to be a continuous conversation. Jeff Van Drew apparently had conversations with President Trump yesterday in his quest to get to yes. Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, also of the New York area, had conversations apparently on this issue. So it's an issue that maybe it's put away for now, but it's not going to be for long.
No, it's not. You're so right. And the biggest problem, if you look at this, Peter Baker, is we're talking about DOGE and the problems they're having at town hall meetings in red state America right now with DOGE. Listen to some of these numbers. When it comes to cutting of Medicaid, and what that would do to red state America, it would lead to rural hospital closures. Medicaid accounts for up to 15% of rural hospitals' revenue, and those hospitals are already struggling, as you know. Over the past 10 years, 120 rural hospitals have had to close down. They're having trouble getting doctors there. And also, as you know, as you go to red state America and a lot of cities and towns in red state America, they're number one employers. I saw this when I went to Little Rock and interviewed Bill Clinton on the 20th anniversary of his presidential library opening up. The number one employer. Healthcare providers, hospitals, and that's in one red state after another red state. So I'm saying all this just to say, if these Republicans think they're having problems now with cuts here and there with DOGE, when they start talking about slashing Medicaid to give billionaires tax cuts, that's when, as Ross Perot would say, the rubber hits the road. And then that's when things get really tough.
Well, and you understand that President Trump understands that, too, right? From the beginning, 10 years ago when he started running, he said Medicare and Social Security were always going to be off the table. He said just the other day that Medicaid was off the table, too, but it's obviously not. And I think that that's going to cause a lot of conniptions. I think you're right. The trick is we're in this, this loop, right? If you want to be serious about tackling the deficit and the issues, Joe, that you're talking about, you're going to have to look at the big ticket items that Mike refers to in his column. But if you go after those big ticket items, there's a lot of pain involved. And if you think that you're pain so far with these DOGE cuts, as you rightly say, this is, as you say, nibbling around the edges. The big stuff is still to come, especially if you make the deficit even wider with more tax cuts. Any rational look at the budget over the last decade or so has involved serious cuts as well as tax increases because there's a lot of red ink there. And if you're going to try to close that red ink, you're going to have to look at a lot of different things, much of which would cause pain for people. But that's not where this is happening here. What we're seeing here is a lot of gains politically because we get to give tax cuts to people. That's always politically popular. And we get to showcase things that look like waste and fraud through this DOGE process, but really don't really amount to much, although it hurts individuals and employees and science funding and all these other things that actually matter to a lot of Americans. And the bottom line is you haven't really solved the problem that you allegedly, ostensibly, are set out to tackle in the first place.